sit as close together as you can, as it feels comfortable, of course.
Come closer, magical creatures. Come closer. It's all good. It's all good over here in the woods. It's the Whispering Woods. And it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Mark Nemes, another iconic figure from the Hungarian community. He's from my hometown, actually, from Page. He's involved in the underground scene there and also in the role-playing scene. And he's going to talk about his concepts relating to ritual and role-playing and lucid gaming. Take it away.
Hi everyone. Will you be needing me to talk into the microphone because I can forego using it absolutely? For the stream it's necessary. All right, then we're gonna go with that. So hi everyone, my name is Mark, and if you have checked the introduction, or you will, you can already tell that I dig magic. And of course, probably there's a good chance that sooner or later down the years I will be studying it professionally, PhD, But that's not why you're here. You're here to understand how this magic could be mechanized, how the core of magical transformations could be implemented in game design or role-play design or LARP design even. Now, what you're gonna know, however, on the LARPing territory, I don't have much personal experience, but on role-play design, community leading, I got some. So what you're gonna see today will be, well, to put it simply, a trip. A lot of times there will be interactive panels where I will ask you questions. Very short answers, quick fire, really, don't think twice, just whatever comes to your mind. Feel free to put your hands up any times, because I like people putting their hands up anytime. But if you feel like you can contribute, I have this little habit when I just point at you, like the Inquisition does, don't worry, no witch burnings today, and we'll ask you to do a quick, just anything that comes to mind relating to that question. If anyone feels uncomfortable with this point coding out stuff, please sign now, okay? Because I don't want to intrude your personal space any more than that, okay? You won't get away with this. We're going to talk about this over beers. But he has a special pass because of that, and he's going to pay for that. So what I'm offering here is I dubbed lucid gaming, obviously based on lucid dreaming and game design. It's a fusion approach that mostly emphasizes personal transformation. You will see what this is shaping up to be. This is, by this point, a theoretical model. It definitely has its possibilities and premises, but also has its hazards. So probably by the end of this little lecture, we will have a good old-fashioned debate about how this is effed up and how this is so promising at the same time. I really hope so. So let's get it on, I do believe. So I dubbed this play Lucid Games with Lucid Prizes, first steps towards a reinvented type of play. Once again, this is a theoretical framework, this is a set of guidelines, and it's very much under development. However, I think a lot of things will be familiar to you if you know the works of Joseph Campbell, Victor Turner, and Robert Bly, especially with his mythopoetic man movement. Let's get it on with this. So I got a question to open with. Dear people, very simple terms. Give me very short descriptions, or if you want to be fancy, Latin terms, you know about it. Who are we? So very quickly, very easily. What are the shortest definition of human, or the most popular one you can give to us? Dear gentleman with the grey hair.
I think humans are animals desperately trying to prove they're not.
Desperately trying to?
Desperately trying to prove that they are not.
Yes, oh yes, definitely. It's very funny because this is the fusion of two very popular concepts of descriptions of humanity. We will get to that in some. Thank you, very good insight. Kiki. Yes, Homo sapiens is probably the most well-known, most scientific, and most fancy beer-drinking basic explanation of what human beers are. Yes, human beers, absolutely great. Anyone else? Yes, you. Where are you from, by the way? Hi. Oh. Yes?
People that are thinking about their thinking.
Yes, we are overthinking animals, definitely. Absolutely. One more, and then we're going to go move on. Mati? Any ideas? Yep.
Yeah, very good at contradictions.
Yeah, Homo paradoxicus. Yeah. We can dub fancy names ourselves, I mean. So I gathered some other fancy names from people who had much better personal brands than us and already got them published. But as you can see, we can come up with our own definitions, and it doesn't make them any less false. that gave me the audacity to come up with mines. So the most nation is very much based on what you said. It's zoon politikon that comes from Plato and Aristotle from the 4th century before Christ. We are politicizing animals, and the ability to whatever sets us apart is the ability and need to govern and organize ourselves as a society beyond the mere community and pack level. That's what he says. Homo sapiens is the most popular term, understandably. It's from Carl Linnaeus from 1759. It's based on us being thinkers, meanderers, so it's very basic, very old school Enlightenment thinking. It emphasizes cognition and abstraction as the base premise of what places us above animals. Homo faber, fabricating human, is based on Karl Marx, Kenneth Oakley, Max Frisch. Thank you for not even mentioning Marx. We are developers, fixers, makers, and remakers of tools. So it's mostly focused on humans being animals who create artificial aids to our environment and to develop our own everyday existence. This has reached the point where we live in an artificial environment completely. And I'm very intrigued to see how could we survive as Homo faber in a non-artificial environment. A LARP is a great experience place for that, I believe. Homo sentimentalis is somewhat ironic, as befitting the 90s. It's from Milan Kundera. And it's based on the ability to impose seeming cultivation on a chaotic internal world and value sets to emotion. In short, it means we deify our emotions and make up reasons to make them relevant and above the animal kingdom. This is what he says. Yes, he was a cynical ass. So, homo interrogans is very close to what you just mentioned. Questioning human. It's from John Bruen, but it's based on John Herschel's idea. The emphasis is based on that we are a curious species. We are problem-seeking to solve and experimental. The emphasis is on being able to doubt, to review, to research and criticize and upgrade things and concepts all around us. And Homo combinans is very close to home. It's the combining human from Cedric Burks. I think it's Burks. So he emphasizes the ability to consciously strive towards invention and reinvention, what I'm trying to do here. But the next slide, I think, will be very familiar to you because we are all gamers. So it's Homo ludens from Johann Huizinga, who is considered the father of ludology, ludology being the anthropological study of the relation of humanity and games. So yes, you can actually get a degree out of it. I mean, this is what keeps me alive. It means that to be human is to generally be playful to a complicated degree. Every animal is playful, but not as complicatedly playful as we are. I mean, lions don't have GOG or epic, obviously. The ability and need to strive towards fun being an engine of both learning and living a full life, is very prevalent on the conscious level of human existence too, not just the subconscious. So I really dig this comparison. This is Huizinga's basic definition of play, and this is Catherine Becker's, and I think if we put these two together, we will get an actually properly working cocktail of what I would call, what my game designer buddy Csaba would call the formal elements of gaming. Huizinga emphasized the following: play is based on choice, play is voluntary, follows a set of rules. That's quite basic at this point. It happens within the magic circle. A magic circle being a separated physical space and a separated, specially prepared place where the LARPing, the gaming, whatever, spin the bottle takes place. Play is different. Different in a meaning that it's separated from our everyday lives. It's extraordinary, and we are allowed to become, well, practically a party of others, literally, and others to each other, to and others towards society. And play promises no financial gain. It's very tricky because some role-playing conventions or even tabletop conventions do, but even in those contexts, and I can safely say that in my humble experience, it's really not what drives it forward. If it is, well, it's already gone to shit, so. And they probably gonna need to sell those shitty products, so yeah, be graceful to them. Catherine Becker's, I think, is a bit more developed. She emphasizes play being interactive, play having a purpose. Now that's something new, especially in this postmodern era where we strive on the seas of confusion. We need a purpose to not get lost in all the meanings offered to us. Play follows a set of rules, just the same. Play encapsulates a sense and form of progression. Now progression needs a signifier. Any of you play D&D? 5th edition? Of course you did, thank you. So one of my biggest hurdles with D&D, and I actually teach a personalized tool that's added to it, is what I call the invisible character sheet. There's a lot of brackets you can fill up in D&D on the character sheet, being background or personality flow and looks, but one, you're just given a few short word examples, and two, they are not mechanized. Now, if you have ever tried to design a tabletop role-playing game, you will understand that whatever is not mechanized, it's not in the game. It's up to the role players, up to the dungeon masters, but since there are no rules and no mechanics in a mechanic-heavy game that strongly relates on mechanics and roles and calculations, if they don't have a signifier, they will not be in play. They will not be prompted to be in play unless the player and the dungeon master wants it to. And even then, one of the biggest and cheapest tricks Dungeons & Dragons pulled, that it promised you everything but gave you barely any tools beyond fighting. Now, Catherine Becker demands this, and she's right too. Play ends, however, with closure. That's very tricky. Huizinga didn't emphasize closure or ending a game, but Catherine Becker did it. She believed that just as when you're writing a novel, you got to write towards the ending of it. And that means you got to design several outcomes in advance, especially if you write an adventure or prepare a LARP session, to see which way the story will go. Of course, that's tricky because that boils down to player agency, and they really don't want to get into their agency would demand a completely different show. But in my personal experience and the models I teach in my little venture in Pécs called Kocka Collegium, that's Geeks College, it's practical Sunday school educational program of role-playing games and just generally good democratic, sensitive, and team working practices and creative writing, obviously. So in there, I often say that when you sit down and actually try to design an adventure, you got to come up with at least 4 outcomes, at least 4 types of outcomes. A failure with consequences, a win with consequences. You can vary this with a partial failure and a partial win, but it's besides the point. You can come up with an escape. Now that's a hidden kind of solution, but it works. And my favorite is the tricky compromise. How you can turn the situation to your favor, or maybe how you can make peace or some form of pact with the villain or the hazards that's at play. Now, if you design an adventure, and if you are a practiced dungeon master, you will recognize that players want agency. They want to make all the decisions, but the trick is you can very easily guide them and deceive them in their own benefits, of course, to guide them towards only a single big decision. In the first phase, or first act of play, in my experience, there are circumstantial drama, like getting together in a tavern, who plays what, pub games, whatever. In the second phase, where there are conflicts and rising tensions, players are given a smaller part of agency. Their agency boils down to 2 questions. How do they solve the problems? Because they have to. And which problems they can evade. So you got to come up with a modular structure. We will talk about this later on my Sunday presentation. That will be more like a workshop. This was, by the way, not a planned advertisement, just came up. Promise. So, but the end, just a second. But the end is the end that matters, because at the very end, when everything gets absolved, this is where the 4 paths I've just mentioned must come up. This is where you must offer them true choice. They have worked towards. And once you have the 4 outcomes for the last act, you can very easily mix and match, promise, reward, whatever you need to, but they are given an actual choice. 1 big choice per adventure, 1 truly big one, but that must matter. And if you have planned it ahead, everything can be safer. Yes, please.
I feel that in a longer game, in a campaign,
Yeah.
the best problems
Mm-hmm.
are those that players create for themselves.
Yes.
They're the most significant ones. That's the choice structure is built upon exactly what big problem do you choose to impose over yourself, and what do you do before.
Yeah.
This is where the magic closes.
Yes. Yes.
Agency.
Yes, definitely. And actually, it's still in the middle section, because on a longer campaign, I think the same rules apply, just on a longer scale. There are more modules, modular problems, I would say, within the conflict phase. And you can decide several paths, and you should design for players who will, well, absolutely cross your paths and overgo them. But let's not stick down there. We know that we love to play, that's definite, but why? That's a very simple question. Why do you think we love to play? You, sir?
Because this is a way to learn the world, to gain knowledge.
Excellent, learning. So this is one outcome. You, sir? What do you think, why do we play? Yes?
I think
Yes.
And second of all, as an expression of our social identity. Ritualistic.
You said some of my favorite keywords right there. Thank you. Your name is? Hi, Andre. Hi, Andre. And where are you from?
Romania.
Romania. Glad to have you here. Excellent. So we have mentioned social ties, practically, let's say communityness, personal identity, education. What else could you add? Yes?
Also, escapism is a big part of play because we want to escape from our regular life. There's something that happens every day.
Definitely. I should have prepared candies just to throw it out to you, but definitely. I think there's only one more thing, and this is one more thing that boils down what I'm about to talk, actually. Soon, promise you, it's getting there. Any idea?
I think you,
No, 50. First you.
I think you can act fiercely, bravely,
Yeah.
independently without getting shot.
Yes, I think it's part of identification process, but definitely you're right. You can experiment with identities, not just fulfill them. With different identities than yours. Yes? I'll be right with you. No, wait, you were first, sorry. Yes?
I think there's a simple underlying thing. It feels good.
Yes, there's a fun factor. The dopamine boost is a real drug. Yeah?
So we feel competence. And it's almost like what you said.
Now,
Enjoy the competence.
Now that's a part of game design that we don't talk enough. Experiential design. How do we engineer the kind of experiences that need agency, that need players to develop, but don't feel like a push domino that will set a preset path? Excellent. So this is how I gather them. We play for, as you have said, you perfectly summarized all of it. We play for fun. It's for self-care, it's for rebooting, obviously. We play for community ties, for recreating immersion and a sense of belonging. Presume every one of you knows that we have gathered around the fires to tell stories and they built our societies. A lot of people forget that. Why did we gather around the fire? For two reasons. One, because it was terribly cold outside and scary, and it actually fired up our imaginations. So it was Lovecraft before Lovecraft. And the other is because this is where we roasted the meat. So we had our basic needs met. Basic needs met. We filled our bellies, filled our minds, filled our hearts together in light. Light being a ritual place. And the edge of light, the shadows, are where all the fancy theatrical things happen that spark our imagination. Is the liminal space. We're gonna get there. There's, of course, education. Storytelling being the most ancient engine of education humanity has. There are some animals who have something similar, but it's more like dances. Crows, for example, macacos. It's a sign of greater intelligence, but they can say it because we have language. That's a huge difference. This is how the AI will probably murder us all. We give them language so they can say anything we want. Experimentation, as you have mentioned, creating extraordinary experiences and within a safe debate space. I got acquaintances who recognized that they are queer because they were allowed to play in a safe, friendly environment, and they were allowed to play a bisexual character when they were struggling with their own bisexuality. I have seen extremely shy or even socially anxious people stepping up and actually deciding to live play as a beginner, as a presentation form within my program. It's absolutely heartwarming to see these kind of blossomings in personality. And of course, there's transformation. That's my favorite. So when you play, sometimes when you have a very deep experience, very engaging, you actually carry on the change. It's not just you go home. After people watched Avatar for the first time, I mean, not the Ang one, but the big blue Amazonian avatars, yeah, the big blue, strangely sexy fury ones who are not furies. Of course not. So when people watched Avatar, a lot of them got a sense that was very similar to melancholy and nostalgia mixed when they got home. There were two reasons of that. One, the technology it was presented it was so deeply based on perception and senses that it was engrossing. It was similar to the shock when people first seen recordings of trains 100 years ago and actually died of heart failure because they were that scared, even though it was a very, very terrible recording. They felt this overstimulation, this shock, but also, strangely enough, Avatar is becoming one of the founding movies of this generation. So, climate activism, for example. My generation's founding movies was probably Captain Planet, for example. I still can remember that. But this generation probably grows up on Avatar, and we all know that it's a very classic story told. It's really understandable. The new angles are transhumanism, transformation, And it's not just bodily change, it's not just bodily exchanged, it's also a spiritual and psychological change. The way the hero earns his way into a new community is the kind of transformation process we see, and this is why we don't see his act as an act of treason, but as an act of fulfillment. I think this is what I truly wanted to place my little model on. So this metamorphic element, I believe, is that has the biggest potential of all elements in this kind of setup. If, let's say, lucid gaming setup. There's a lot of ways of transformation. You can use escape as transformation, trying out new ways to cope, dealing with the world, safety to fail. That's important. In play, you are safe to fail, both because of the setting, both because of the tools, and both because you have monitoring peers who actually take care of you. Roleplay can be transformation, taking on temporary identities, trying out clashes, play fighting, and of course new abilities you wouldn't profess. Let's say you're an antisocial person, or you think yourself you are. Nobody is antisocial. Nobody's antisocial that much. And let's say you want to play a socialite. Now, this is a fantastic transformative experience. How can you play a socialite that could be circumnavigated if you are actually a social person? By creating the kind of character, let's say with talent trees, that actually enable in-game benefits and bonuses for you without rolling, so it becomes a tactical process before it becomes a dramatic process. And it helps. For example, there's a great game in Britain, just won Game Expo last year, it's called Shiver. It very well does just that with a socialite talent tree. I really dig that, by the way. There's also caution as transformation. We often forget about it, how scary stories and destructive stories where actual destruction can be cathartic or catabasis can be educational, because we also forget that horror stories, scary stories are the brothers or sisters or siblings or non-binary siblings, doesn't matter, the siblings of folktales. Folktales show you what to do and why will you be gifted for that. Why scary stories tell you what's the reward of fools, how not to act, what not to do, and they are horrific to this day. I mean, the Grimm fairy tales are the fusion of both, obviously. Lessons learned as transformation, as we have mentioned. There, as you can understand, there's educational games and games for learning. That was one of my own studies with Miss Edith Lipai and Miss Monica Reti. In the pastor section, you have seen the wizard that's are doing practically. And that's based on that. You can gamify education, but you can also create games that are educational, based on topic, based on mechanics. Now, there are roles reformed as transformation. That's a whole new level. That's not education anymore, that's training. You can actually transfer skills subtly, just practices, let's say rather practices, through a gaming environment. It will lead the player to a new real-world responsibility to, or even might prepare. What a lot of people forget, that the original ritual process, especially identification rituals like becoming an adult or getting wed, often were cautionary tales or horror tales and needed symbolic gestures. They were not therapeutic in a sense, but they were not therapeutic in the sense as we use it, because they were not meant to heal or help you cope with trauma. They were meant to make sure that you don't get into that trauma. So it was a preemptive measure. It's very funny because this is from economics, but it actually works. That's Rob Levelin's model of change. It's quite fresh. It's 2018, I think. So yes, it's a bit small, so I will just very quickly get through that. There are 4 phases of it. Envisioning, engaging, transformation, and optimization. I think it's from an insider perspective, obviously. Every business transformation, he says, is an iterative process. It goes through different phases and recurring phases. First, you envision what you want to do. Create cases for change, whatever. You set up your goals, you set up your you assess your resources. Engage. You empower people to act on the vision and plan the effort. This practically is crew work, especially if you're a LARP organizer, you know how crucial this is. There's transform, then after that, it's visible both in the crew work and then in the attendees. There's a change in behavior, a change in process, change in technology. If we think in terms of crew work, this is where you iterate inventions and test them out, hopefully, before you bring it to the grounds. And then in the end, there's optimization, of course. This is very similar, by the way, to the female method, for example. It's practically the same, just with a business model. Where you see where is your plan leaking, where it's troublesome, where it's problematic. What you're going to see is going to be probably this kind of plan, but we're here to talk about it. Now, Are there lessons learned? How can we maintain lessons learned? There was a very nice study about children understanding the abstract concept of density and movement consequence, and it initiated these very great two terms, transient knowledge and robust knowledge. Very quickly going to talk about this before we get into the gist of it really. So, the takeaway is, what do we bring home with us once playtime is over? Can we optimize the experience to be not merely educational, but deeply transformational? And once we ask the right questions, we can design towards those questions after that. Transient knowledge and robust knowledge, however, are different. When you go to any kind of LARP or any kind of role-playing event, you probably go home with transient knowledge. Transient knowledge is very simple. It's freshly gained. It's based on personal experience and subjective interpretations of whatever happened. It's dynamic. It's fresh. It's malleable. How you can see the symbolism or the Easter eggs, I don't know, at your play. These are not necessarily useful knowledges as of yet. They are the fuel, they are the raw materials you can build from. Remembering it and using it is circumstantial, because sometimes it will just pop to your mind that, oh yeah, I know about it, we played actually about this. But once again, this is, at this point, still mostly trivial. Even if it's useful, it's trivial. Trivial knowledge. It's mostly shaped by experiments, personal interpretations, reinterpretations, and it will actually fade into memory if it's left as is. Now, you can solidify it later, however. Robust knowledge is what might become of it. Robust knowledge is imprinted, probably with several experiences or repeated experiences and practices. It's based on practice, so it goes beyond experience. Transient knowledge becomes robust if you practice it, if you hone it, if you turn it into a skill. Let's say you really dig horror games. I really dig horror games. I very quickly came to understand the good horror as a game has one very simple secret. Always attack the character's fears, not the player's fears. This is one. And two, the actual core of the game, the story structure, not the genre, the story structure should not be horror because it works with the player's fears. So it challenges them, not the characters. This buffer actually grants them safety in the horror game. And after that, you can dress anything up into horror, really. So it's not that difficult. And you become better with facing your character's fears through repeated plays of horror and different kinds of horror games. There's so many horror games right now. Cosmic, folk, mystery, gory slasher stuff, ironic. You can play anything like that. However, this knowledge is static, it's formulated, it's codified, like when you have prepared for an exam, studied for it, and then you know it, at least for a while. Remembering robust knowledge and using it becomes natural after a while because robust knowledge is turned into routine. And what's important is, based on this children's study, is the researchers realized that children actually managed to turn their knowledge into robust knowledge if they had peer support. If everyone around them were doing something similar, or cheered them on, or was just there, witness effect, it greatly improved their chances of turning transient knowledge into robust, and the pace too. So we will deal with these terms. Now, how can we design truly life-changing scenarios? I gathered 4 design questions, but I want you to ask yourselves and share what you have in mind. What do you think? Just one simple aspect, okay? Not a full solution. What do you think? How can we design truly life-changing scenarios? Any idea, any aspect, any viewpoint, or maybe even a mechanic or a trick you can share from your little bucket of everything? Any ideas? Yep.
Mostly communication, like knowing what the player wants, or like what a specific group likes.
Yes, definitely. I'm actually a public speaking presentation teacher, and it's very funny because even if you do a scientific thesis, I gotta teach audience research basics. It doesn't mean that we sit down and do research. It means that we do this little trick, the biohazard sign with the 3 interlocking circles. And always say them, don't try to remember as a diagram, try to remember it's biohazard time. And they will remember it because it's imprinted. Anything they can tie it to, it works. The 3 circles in there are the people with interests, the people with needs, and the people with money, so resources. And the funniest thing is, you gotta aim at the intersections. It's very similar to that. In marketing, on deeper level marketing, you actually gotta create consumer avatars and present them probably in a pitch. But we don't go that far. So once again, yes, crucial. It's very crucial to understand community. However, if you are, let's say, a LARP organizer, and I'm theorizing it because once again, I'm not that experienced in LARPing. My first really big will be just towards this August, but then I could write a whole book about the stories I heard and shouldn't tell. So once again, let's stick to this communication. If you're a LARP organizer, you create a program and you offer it up. There's initially, at the very least, there's not much chance of sitting down to every proper player, and of course you're gonna later cut out the dangerous elements, but it's not as straightforward and easy as in a role-playing game situation at the table. But definitely yes, so there's a filtration process. What else?
I think if you want to have truly life-changing moments of play, it's important for people to feel before going into play that their sense of self-worth and identity is tied to a certain extent to their performance.
Yes.
To a certain extent, be them on a ranking scale
Yes.
or on a more descriptive,
Mhm.
more descriptive manner, to within that play, so that for them it is not dissociated from their identity, what they're actually doing.
There were three things there, and all of you are very clever. I really dig your input. If you create a very inclusive kind of play, especially for a ritualistic play, because this is a ritualistic model, I think actually giving numbers takes away to the magic. I wouldn't do it any otherwise. I'm very much into synergy and mechanizing everything, but in this case I wouldn't say it because that would create a false sense of competition when it's not about competition, it's about everyone crossing that freaking threshold, everyone undergoing and facing the challenge. This is what this whole model is about. You must face the trial, but we will do everything to help you, even in ways you couldn't imagine. This is actually, I do believe, the pull and push of Lucid Gaming. This is where it stands, because it, in a way, it offers but also pushes the player in a certain way a little bit. However, personal boundaries can and will come into question. This is probably the biggest hazard. And referring back to communication, I do believe because you can't, especially if you're a creative person, you can't design to everyone's benefit. So you gotta keep in mind generalized needs and very basic, primal, I would rather say mythic human approaches, mythic stories, because they are the most ancient to us.
I want to make some comment because I think something is missing there. Life-changing is very vague.
Yes.
I would say, because what we need, I think,
Yes.
what we aim is positive life-changing scenarios. And saying this for me is something that empowers the participants, that
Yes.
gives them some skills.
Definitely.
And I think it's something that goes to what you said, and it comes to retell the story for themselves. Participants should be able, after the experience, to have a new story of themselves.
Yes, that's very tricky. I do believe it comes down of how you internalize it, what you take away from it. However, if you create this kind of formulaic play, because it needs to be very formulaic in this, in symbolically, and to not to let it fall apart. Since it's a very personal journey, the whole game is very personalized. It's very tricky where you pull your own boundaries. How and when will you allow the player to step outside of bounds, and do they, just a second, and do they, are they encouraged to? I do think that we can design around it, actually. The next question is works down that. What works best as source and structure? Because this is where it boils down. Yes, please?
Yeah, I'll go back to communication with the players, because that's actually really important. Brief and debrief before and after the game, that's what's the life-changing. You can have one single sentence said in-game to someone, and that can change the person's life forever.
Yes.
And the same way, before the game, you can ask him, where are your boundaries? What's your okay?
Absolutely needed, yes.
After the game, we have this practice in Bulgaria recently to ask all the players, what's the moment you take home with you? What's the thing you remember from the game? And usually I understand that at the moment I say some situation, I give us an example of some realization I found out during the game, but after, inside I remember much more and I think about much more, but that's what I've said. Yeah.
What you mentioned is very important. I didn't include it here, but I'm very glad that you came up with it. Later, there will be a small mention of it. This is what I called session -1, session 0, and after that, there's the briefing. It's very important to have these shared words so we all know what we're talking about. There are game designers here, actually, and a lot of people who design games, by now me included, what we really struggled with oftentimes, I see it first, I come from communication media training, and I'm a media researcher. What was establishing a shared language, even if it was not professional language, that we understand that what we're talking about, when we use a word, we mean the same thing. Now, however, and this is a great turn based on what you said, it's very important once again to know what your audience or hopeful audience, target audience wants, your avatars, your perfect consumer personas want, but you have an idea, you have an intention. So first, very first, before even you ask them, you gotta come up with some form of skeleton that you can adjust to their needs. And this skeleton must be, however, inclusive and general enough for them to be believable and livable. The good thing is, however, it can be, and it's actually good to be very formulaic in this case because it's absolutely about the experience, not about a deep, engaging, and intricate story. No, we are dealing about very emotional, very haphazard grounds. So knowing the rules of story and symbology actually helps them. Yes?
No, it was thumbs up.
Great, excellent. So, actually, we just arrived to that. I promise this is not programmed this way. We're just so much in the flow right now. So, how can this be safe? I think this is the most crucial, and this is the most. This will be the most debated question of this whole game design approach or game design guidelines. How can we make this safe? Sooner or later, even if we do everything well, somebody will definitely break down, as it happens with every LARP game. How can we implement the kind of saving rules, and how can we implement the savers into the environment without breaking immersion for the player, for the other player? And there's one thing I do believe, I might be wrong, that's rare in this kind of, that's very often in this kind of game, but rare in other LARP scenarios. That is, in LARP scenarios, whatever you choose, good or bad, fair, whatever, consequences keep the drama running. Here, however, there are trials after each other, like a hero's journey. Hero's journey is an absolute basic model for this. So you must cross that threshold. Anyways, you might skip one or two, but you gotta work for that. So no free skipping, no free meals. Or you can find alternative routes, but in a way, you must face it. Any one of you saw The Northman? I really dig that movie. Yeah. When I saw it, it was a life-changing experience for me because of the end. The movie was great, but the ending was what truly did it for me. Not because of what he did, but what he said about destiny. This is what absolutely, completely reshaped my view about destiny. I hated it. And in the end, he goes off to a volcano to face his ancient foe. And he says, this struggle ends with me. So that's very important. He was prepared to die. He didn't go there explicitly to die. But what he understood, that destiny was nothing else but the need of facing the trial. It's much more important than the actual outcome of said trial. And this is what this whole model is all about. Now, how can we make that lasting? So not just give you a fantastic experience, but how can you make it, well, imprinted? How can you make it more robust and transient? Yes, please.
Your emotions, because emotions are the one thing that
Yeah.
imprints in our mind.
Yeah. And emotions are generated by experiences, so we can design experiences for them. The trickiest part in this case, I do believe it's good if such a game is run with a small group, and it's good if there's no parallel groups. Maybe one. I haven't gotten there. This is just the basics, I believe. But definitely. So once again, this is more experience design than story design. It's not about intrigue. It's about not even about drama, not even about double stakes and who screws up with who. No, it's more about the personal journeys, and those journeys are ancient, extremely ancient. I don't know. Can you guess which is the presumably oldest known fairy tale of humanity, and how old is that? Any guesses? Gilgamesh is very ancient. I think it dates back to the 15th century before Christ, if I remember. Maybe the 16th. Or even, 3,000 from now, yeah. That's very ancient, but that's not. There's more ancient stuff there. Anybody, any ideas? By the way, Gilgamesh was used as a blueprint for the Iliad, for the Odyssey, obviously. So, ideas? Maybe just put your favorite fairy tale that comes to mind, and I might try to guess where it goes back to. This is a very funny little game. So, Kiki, I see you're already thinking hard about it.
I'm trying to remember what cartoons or like fairy tales I even know.
It's all right. You can even say grim tales because there are some very primal, not even moral, but cautionary tales. Most grim tales actually are grim. Funnily enough, they were more cautionary tales than fairy tales. They are practically horror tales with fairy tale elements. Any ideas? What's your favorite fairy tale? Yeah. Anything that comes up your mind quickly, just like that? Last one you read or watched? All right. Any? Rumpelstiltskin. It's very funny. Rumpelstiltskin is a negative trickster character, but not a scoundrel. He is a trickster. A scoundrel is who creates and dives into chaos in the external world. A trickster is chaos, is change. This is why if there's a divide between two archetypes, the variation of classic trickster and classic scoundrel divides here. This is why Loki is different than Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones and Han Solo are scoundrels, but Loki and Rumpelstiltskin are tricksters. They are shapeshifters. They are gender shifters. They cannot be trusted, but because they are the chaotic engines of change in the world, they are needed to actually see the life. In very literal sense, if we see the children of Loki, for example. But also Rumpelstiltskin is, strangely enough, is not a parental character, he's a threat to children. But he also works on the ancient fundamentals of pacts. Funnily enough, Rumpelstiltskin is never called a fairy, never called a fae, but everything in his tale relates to that. And once again, why was this so important for people to understand that others, the different people, have magical powers? Simply enough, because ancient society that didn't have those must have argued on conviction and pacts. Given word was the law. This is why the most ancient form of others that are human-like, which are the fairies, work through this very ancient method to this day in story traditions, obviously. Now, I'm going to tell you, because we're running out of time a little bit, so the most ancient to the knowledge is golden hair. And it's guessed to be before the crescent, the fertile crescent, or somewhere around it, probably even ancient, more ancient than that, and it's guessed to be 6,500 years old. And it's extreme. And it's not just based on, very scrumptious little grannies keep telling the tale. It means these myths are practically the precursor of our psychology. They have life models, life chances, complete textbooks and screenplays you can try out by trying to identify as the people you are turning out to be. This is why they are so relevant, and this is why, for example, Jung and other people base their psychological models on these very ancient and, most importantly, shared concepts. We already had the background knowledge, we just didn't have the structure for them, and they came up with that. And we're going to utilize the same knowledge in lucid gaming. And we're going to find the Holy Grail, hopefully. So, we talk about these dreams. That sweet dreams are made of what? We can very easily ask after this. We just talked about mythic archetypes and mythic tropes. Myths, any kind of remixing of myths, even to modern story structures, will always be familiar, and we will be somewhat comfortable even with villains as long as we can bracket them into boxes. And it's good, because it helps us in our own journey as protagonists. Now, we took a very big turn, and we're going to talk about, because we talk about gaming at this point, we talk about lucidity in this case, and then it's going to all come together. So, what is lucidity, and what is liminality? Lucidity, I summed it up as is, when you are lucid dreaming, we play our parts with awareness. We are half aware. We understand at this point that we are in a dream and we can do anything we want to. However, we don't know the limitations of said dream. We can maneuver ourselves into being scared or dying in the dream, even though we understand that we are nigh omnipotent in such a dream. It's funny enough, who have ever had lucid dreaming experiences? Yeah. It's funny enough, if you ever had it, if you can remember it, although you understand that now you have, let's say, meta-neurotic effect. So you can manipulate the story flow of the dream itself. And yet, by knowing that you have just become the master of reality, you don't twist reality. Somehow you remain in accordance with the rules and symbology of the story. You don't suddenly start to fly, you just engineer a better meeting with an opponent, or you twist the fight in your dreams into a win. But you don't suddenly sprout wings or become an angelic being and don't start doing godly things, because you have a recognition and understanding how far the limits of your mental story goes. This is the passive knowledge I talked about. So in roleplay also, I came to the conclusion that when we roleplay, we are practically also in a semi-lucid state, not biologically necessarily. However, funnily enough, if you are very deeply ingrained in flow, and people actually made some research on base that, you may generate beta waves, which are generated in the secondary REM phase, and which you generate during lucid sleep. There is such depth where you can truly get into the zone and transcend to a higher plane of consciousness through gaming. Now, let's talk about liminality. Liminality is about limits, crossing them, but generally speaking, not knowing where they are. This is the whole thing of liminality. Such lucid yet extraordinary experiences may occur in a ritually prepared environment. So, if they appear in ritual spaces, they can be guided and they can be engineered. And this is what we aim for as writers and designers. Liminal spaces exist in small pockets of society too. Actually, what we call genre fiction, that mostly formulated through the Middle Ages from picaresque novels and mostly formulated in the Victorian era with pulp prints and penny dreadfuls. They formulated in the very real, very physical liminal spaces within society. Brothels, underground lairs, grassroots groups, illicit and secret societies, and any kind of intimate spaces, including just a humble abode with your lover who nobody knows about. Liminality is the setting of social transformation, but it's also a setting of subcultural practices. Who loves underground music, truly underground, like dark ambient, black metal, I don't know. Yeah, you can free to admit it. If you've ever been to any such parties, I mean, look at me, I don't look like a guy who listens to post-black metal, but I do, as long as there's no Satan in it and the sound production is not shit, I'm down. But what's important, these places, these practices, these very special experiences have specially prepared spaces. We call it the underground for F's sake. It's not merely an euphemism, it's very literal, it's a symbol in itself. It's unseen from the above, it's in the dark, and in the dark there's opportunity, in the dark there's chaos, in the dark there's no limits, as long as you know where the exit is. So liminality is also temporary, spatially separated, and the earlier spiritual models include the world of ideas from Plato, dreamtime from the Vedu-Australid concept of mythic spirit worlds, and of course Jung's collective subconsciousness. They all refer to liminality as a beautiful and outside parallel dimension that we affect and whichever affects us. However, liminal practices, be them subcultural or gaming, shape us. And it all comes down to one of my favorite little models, Victor Turner's cycle of ritual. Added a little bit stuff to it, very quickly gonna go through that. This, as you can see, very similar to the hero's journey. It is based on the hero's journey, but it is not entirely that, and it's much more general than that is. So, we are here mostly, right now we are here by the way, but generally we are here in society, societas. It's too abstract, too big, too numerical for us to truly and live. It's something that you can't experience society. You can experience living in a society. Joker says, we live in a society. But you can't experience living with each and every one of your neighbors. You can't walk every street. You can't eat every food, and you can't be attacked by every horrible political party there is. And there's a whole list. So to navigate there, you got identities, masks, as Goffman would put it. He had a very radical theory. It says that we don't have a core of our personality. We only have masks that are repeated and exchanged according to the needs of the situation. But when you want to try your identity or develop it, you separate from the mess. Let's say the mess is the society, and you leave it all behind. Now, let's imagine that this is a classical African adulthood ritual. The young ones are separated from their parents because they are becoming adults, both physically, but it's much more important that they must become adults in a role that must be recognized in their peer group, and that role must be earned. not just because of the peer group, but for their own psychological development. You leave it all behind when you go then. If any of you have been in a fetish party, don't worry, I will not ask. If any of you have ever been to a fetish party, you understand there's a huge dress code right there. You can't even enter in denim. It's forbidden. And there's a whole set of safety tools we can actually learn from as game developers. They're very good in safety tools in a proper fetish party. But once you go down there, you're not a professor, you're not an accountant, you're there for a kinky little evening. It can transpire into something else, but it's not going to transpire there. It's only stupid Hollywood movies that twist into orgies, you know. But you leave the role behind, and you enter the secret word, the anti-structure. This is communitas. Societas, society, are the preset concepts of what was and what can be. You don't live in the present unless you're doom scrolling on social media, of course. But when you are in a communitas, you're there. It's Zen. When you are focused on a LARP, for example, or just in a very good game, we don't have anything else. But it's not just your mind state, it's a shared mind state with everyone else. You see, these people are far apart, obviously, because this is, in a way, unnatural. But it's needed to be developed into a situation. This unnatural is good, it's necessary. Okay, I wouldn't say good, but it's necessary. It's in our nature to be unnatural, in a way. This is natural, much more natural. This is Pax Spirit. This is the Venus idea. These are the communes. These are, well, even the orgies. But it's not about that. It's about tossing your old self away. Let's say, get back to the African ritual of youth. Everybody gets shaved. Everybody gets naked, and everybody gets painted white. So no gender signs, no any sexual identificators are present in a way. They are even covered up to make sure that women and males look familiar. This is a symbolic process, once again, to create this feeling, this transitional persona that we are all the same, that we belong together, we are humans first and foremost. And then you undergo trials. What's important? There's always a rite master, a shaman, if you want to. And through trials, you do symbolic, mostly actually very simple tasks. The circumstances can be scary, but the tasks are themselves very simple. It's more important that you just walk through that freaking field. It's like playing a bit scary walking simulator in a computer game. You undergo trials where you symbologically earn your new identity, and then when you return from the darkness of the cave or the underground or the ritual tent, you present not as that painted weirdo, but you have the colors of the warrior, or a fertile woman who is ready to take on the responsibility of bearing children. Mind you, we're talking about classicals and very primal societies, so no pressures on that front. But what's important, that they have earned their new status, they present themselves, and they are presented to the community as their new status. Now they are grown men, they can hunt. Now they are grown women, they can make a family. Then they return into the societas in a new role. Very similar to the hero's journey. And this goes on in almost every way of our life. Just a second. It's not that visible, or it wasn't that visible until recently, because enlightenment practically destroyed these magical processes that were very much needed for our psychological well-being. But you can see the signs everywhere. This is in extreme radicalization, this is in politics, this is in unseen exchanges, this is in media manipulation, this is subcultures. Yes, please. Yes.
Really, this is the structure of rites.
Yes. It's one of the most popular types of rites, the rites of passage. And almost every rite is a rite of passage in itself. Definitely, you're correct. Now, there are keys to the kingdom. So we navigate this dreamscape. We must navigate the dream, what I call the lucid control, and we must navigate the liminal space. Practically, we navigate the time and the space in such a setup. In the dream navigation, I believe that the subject must recognize the dream being a dream. First and foremost, they must be given free hooks and holders to state that even though we are undergoing a ritual play, very theatrical and everything, this is a game, this is a dream. This is important to make it understood. The subject must have hooks, handles, and anchors to solidify themselves. They are almost like safety tools, but they must be integrated into the setup, the physical setup and the story of a lucid gaming experience. The dream must adhere to rules of symbolism. This symbolism must be shared, understood, as you have mentioned, with the -1 and 0 sessions. Liminal space navigation is what I call ritual control. It pertains to, as what LARPers even do, to my understanding, there's a ritual contract or a LARPing contract of what's going to go down, what we're going to do. what are forbidden to you to act, the same. It's all ritual contracts. Liminal navigation. You must set clear boundaries of space-time and peculiar personal sensitivities, obviously, as it was set in Portal Conference 2. You must, it's very tricky, because in this case, actually, you can offer the timeline of what is waiting for the player. It's such an emotional place to be, and it can be so overwhelming that it's not bad that they actually know what kind of trials await them in a very superficial manner. While in other LARPs or any kind of story games, the story is hidden and it develops as they come in. It's not necessary here. It's actually, I think, even helpful to give them some markers, some teasers, some trailers. There are a lot of gates and gate creepers for each challenge, and their significance is much more bigger than in other LARPs. Most of the LARPs, there are some guide characters, some organizers, and a lot of players. Here, I think they are of equal measure. So I think there's almost as many, if not more, gatekeepers and trials and practically animators than as players. It's not that of a spread out experience. You know, if you got groups, if you got cliques, if you got tribes, the whole narrative will collapse because it's not about tribalism, it's about personal journey. And because of the sensitive structure of this whole Lucid gaming stuff, well, you better prepare to keep them mostly on a relatively linear path. This is what a great Hungarian poet, I think it was Pilinszky, János Pilinszky, was called the linear labyrinth, and this is a beautiful concept. Two more important things. There must be chances of rebuttal. So if they try a trial and fail, they must be offered the path right away to try again, to address it. So although these trials might seem life or death, especially in this kind of game, it must be always offered to just go and try it again, because it's about learning lessons. It's about doing symbolic deeds. Like when you play the point-and-click adventure game in your computer and you just couldn't find the right key, and you had all the kind of keys. If you screw up on the first time, there's really no consequence. Go for another key, try that one out, see how it goes. It's more important to look for the keys and try them on than to punish failure. And fetish objects. Now that we mentioned the keys, fetish objects are very crucial in this. In this sense, fetish objects are power objects, signifiers of growing powers, changes in the role, they are given to you as gift, and both as in-game gamifiable objects you can use, the literal keys of the kingdom. Let's get into the little two topics before we sum this up. This is the chapter before the last. So let's open up that mind's eye. Let's talk about the tools and trinkets of a Lucid game we just mentioned. That's about the physical stuff we need to do that. And I think after that we can talk about a little bit of the hazards too. By the end of the whole presentation we'll talk about the hazards and whatever, because I think that's needed to be talked about definitely. And I think you even might have more experience than me on that part. So it's what I call the map of the dreamscape. So when you plan any kind of LARP or any kind of gaming session, especially this, which has, well, therapeutic undertones, it definitely has. You got to prepare that area, how you prepare, how you look for that. There's a designing and a challenges part in this too. I think it's better to go for small locations, one for each trial, separated by distances and the stage of the journey. Like if you remember folktales, for example, the Bogatirs of the Russian and Slavic folktales, the Freak Knights, red, white, black. I don't know about Bulgarian folktales. I just presume they are Slavic and they have similarities. Sorry. So the knights in the Freak Knights actually show up a lot in Baba Yaga stories, for example, and Lost Princess stories. You can see them coming from the distance, even though there's distance between them, because in those stories they are morning, noon, and night. And their constant approach is part of the pressure that's placed on the hero that they must fight them. So it's very funny enough, in this case, you can see them coming, but you're not taking them on at once, obviously. So this is where I wrote including session -1 and 0, as you have mentioned. It's crucial, definitely. Several paths ahead must be included and must be made accessible, hidden but reachable to players. This is how you set up a location to have several solutions to undergo that certain set of trial. There must be always a clear way, and there can be some hidden cues of how else you can evade or how else you can differently tie it, how you can go to the tricky compromise or the escape. Let's say it that way. A location must mirror the type of trials the game is about. And since I do believe Lucid gaming is supposed to be based on mythic structures, nature is generally very good and very fluid setup for that. It doesn't have to be that. But nature, I think, is a good place to start if you ever want to do something like that. Challenges of a Lucid theater. no outside interference. In this LARP, it's extremely crucial, even more than in any other LARP settings that I can imagine, that no outside interference happens. People will be the most vulnerable, even more vulnerable than in traditional role-playing scenarios, because the challenges they face, even though they are in character, in a general character, I mean, character creation here is not even relevant. You are, I don't know, the fresh, young warrior of a tribe. You don't even have to have a name. You're a role. Because it's about trying out roles, you see. It is, as you have said, gamifying rites of passage, practically. I think this is the best we could sum it up, this whole Lucid gaming thing, gamifying rites of passage. What to do in case the player experiences great discomfort. Now, this is mostly based on your personal experiences as helpers and game organizers. This is the trickiest part. We're definitely going to go there. We must include the kind of safety tools and rerouting tools, because once again, we still want them to go through the challenges. Just show them that there are other ways than the triggering one within the game's mainframe without breaking immersion. Now, there's partial freedom, traversal, or clear linearity. How much freedom do you offer for them if this is such a relatively linear game? This is up to personal design choice and capabilities, but this is definitely something you should argue about when you're designing such a scenario. And what to do with other contenders. Should the journey be private or bear to witness for all? If this is such a personal journey, it can be that Gatecreeper meets the challenger, the player, practically. And everything else, let's say that they are followed by a helper, a companion, as in Hero's Journey, Dark Companion or the Hidden Brother, and they might be followed by the mentor too, but they must undergo the challenge. Anyone else is present? Can they see, should they see how they move on? I mean, if they see the solution, this can actually be used as cheating. Or people who are difficult, who find it difficult to undergo such harrowing experiences in public, can be shamed into inaction, can be kind of so much social anxiety, even with such a small circle, that the audience can be their biggest shackle to overcome. Now, if we design the game around overcoming social anxiety, that's a whole different thing, but now we're talking about general terms. And so I think these are the most important challenges faced when you design such an environment. However, there are other props you can use, the fetishes, the power objects, the treasures, the gifts, and the blessings you handle out. Lucid props, and Lucid toolkit I would call them. All tools and props bear symbolic meaning and grant abstract power. A lot of times in LARP design, as far as I understand it, for example, that's you drink an elixir, whatever, you get a little card, a condition card, for example. That's different because that models a real-life change. In this kind of scenario, you're given, let's say, a healing elixir. It's much more fluid than there. You can use it to cure your potion, you can use it to save a life. It's all about symbolic and symbolic fluidity. Every single object there is, that's in the forefront, of course, they're not just decorations. That's one of the challenges, how to differentiate between ritual tools and background tools, decorations, but everything can and should be used. One more thing, I do believe that most of these tools, not all, but most of them should be expandable tools, single or twice usable, because that actually helps people when they are on their journey to understand the value of sacrifice and tactical decision making. And that's part of any hero's journey towards any kind of heroism. Some tools are bought from the real and some earned or lost. Once again, the question is, how do we use two functional tools? How do we decide which real ones we allow and which are the ones that are rooted in the dream? Sacrifice and spending a tool must have great dramatic and narrative effect, just mentioned it, and many guides, each having a costume, lessons, tools, and gifts befitting them, must be present. Almost everyone is a lore NPC, practically. Every gatekeeper is part of the narrative. And just the basic questions. What tools can be brought in by the players or by the organizers? What can only be earned? Which are necessary to continue? How to differentiate, how to help them differentiate between important and unimportant tools? These are definitely questions to be asked by designing such a scenario. And of course the challenges. This is the hardest part, I do believe. There are hazardous purposes and hazardous practices you might, even unintentionally or unknowingly, use or elaborate or allow in such an intimate setup. Hazardous purposes, when you get the wrong idea. You got the wrong idea to begin with. I summed it up as like this. If you try to use this transformative journey as a tool of propaganda or programming to a certain archetype, I do believe there's not one hero's journey. There are even variations. There's even a female hero's journey. I'm still about to get this book. On my BA, I created a whole new model of the hero's journey. I called it a transient hero's journey. It's about the freak, the other, as a hero that's getting prevalent in these days, but it's an emerging thing. And I do believe there's also an anti-heroic journey. I'm still working on that. I need to read a lot of classic literature, and oh boy, it's horrible. But once again, there are several heroic models. And if you can only offer one, it's even worse, even that might work. But if you can only offer one, and if you can only offer one solution and one path forward, you're programming them. You're taking away the agency of the how. And that's the basic agency everyone should be offered. You remember what I said when we began? The what comes at the end, the how comes in the middle. If you take away the how, and there's only one single push forward, even the ones who are pushed forward will feel like they are violated in their free agency. And it's tricky because once again, everybody must undergo the trials. So they will be a little bit more pushed than in any other stuff, but they will be also helped. Then, the aim, destruction, and exclusion of alternative solutions to symbolic life challenges. That's very simple. To put it in much more layman terms, practically censoring other hero types or heroic paths as probable solutions in such a way. Let's say you got a player who is an absolute classical hero. Broadsword, I'm big, I'm strong, I want to prove it. And there's another player who just comes right after him, who's a trickster, who wants to manipulate the gatekeeper, who wants to solve a riddle or deduce the solution or where the key is hidden to, let's say, go behind the back of the giant. You should accommodate both. So the setup should be made in a manner, once again, environmental design. You could tell about this this is storytelling environmental design, that accommodates both approaches. However, if you set up the environment in a way that allows only one path through, then you're forcing the player in very uncomfortable ways. It shouldn't be an exercise in exuberance hubris. Veteran game organizers, LARP organizers, whatnot, often fall into this. Wow, this is a hard idea, this is a strong idea. I can do this. If you approach it that way, you're already screwed. It's not about you, it's not about your abilities. You're probably truly a veteran if you think that you can pull this through. But this is not an exercise. This is intimate. I very strongly recommend that whenever you bring this on, bring in a psychologist, bring in a therapist even if you can, or a communication expert, who is not part of the game, who can work as outside control, like a sensitivity reader when you design a role-playing book. And designing a master challenge. The purpose is facing the trial and helping the participants overcome, not to give them the kind of challenge that they cannot overcome at all. Actually, it's very funny. It shouldn't be hard. It's not about hardness, it's not about difficulty. It's about the experience of overcoming it, earning it gradually towards the big challenge. Yes, please.
So you are arguing to a certain extent that the trial itself is rather symbolic than practical. In essence, it's easy to do.
Yes.
Many times people derive a sense of identity and transformation from them taking a role in society, and thus they need to answer themselves the questions, what am I good at? Mm-hmm. And thus, if the trial is too simple, how can they answer that question?
I think if you go in there as a player, based on what you are good at, I'd rather say, let's think it as if you have just opened a classical role-playing game and you can be a wizard, a mage, or a rogue. There are three very different approaches. A direct, a tricky, and a controlling. If they have the self-image of themselves being manipulative or not strong enough to up there, be a trickster. We will accommodate it. It's okay. But, once again, these scenarios should have what very rarely happens in LARPs, a replay value. Like a cyclical celebration in pagan culture. Because these kind of things underwent there. It was just weren't called Lucid games. They were just simply called rituals and roundabouts and dances. So we should also accommodate them. Once again, the antisocial player who wants to play a socialite. The same boils down. I think this all works in the tools you offer and the environments and challenges you design for them. If they are given these things, you will see that an antisocial player will more and more start to actually act out the talents that would be a simple dice roll. Once they feel like that the dice saves their ass, they are given the lenience to try to act, and they will. I think this answers to your questions, probably.
Just to reformulate so that I make sure that I understand.
Yep.
So you're basically saying, give them paths so their answer to the question, what am I good at, comes from their decision of which path have I taken. It means that is my role in an identitarian sense.
Yes. Once again, it's tricky because the greatest challenge would be of Lucid Gaming for you to face the things you as a person, not as a player, of course, because in here you're an abstract player. You don't even have a name. You play a role in there, face in real life. But once again, this is where you must draw the line. If you are, for example, a strongman as a player and want to play as a strongman, well, the organizers can tell you no. They must accommodate you, but it's better to just prompt them. For example, if you have a situation, walking behind the giant's back as a classic Robert Bly fable in Iron John, the field has a giant in it, it's hurt, it's probably falling asleep. There are a lot of ways you can do that. You can pull the sword from its wound and tell them that you help them. You can look for herbs to cauterize the wound or even lessen their pain before you do that. You could try to parlay with it, you could try to still be, to be stealthy around it, or you could try to cut its throat. However, most players will use a mixture of these. And this is how this environment actually prompts you leaving the preset paths of what you do. You don't have to, and you shouldn't, kill everything in the path, for example. First, you can parlay with it, for example. So it's really not that. A warrior-minded, let's say warrior-minded character will very quickly learn that he should not, and that he doesn't have to kill everything in sight. And I think this is, however, it's a very good point, because how much do we want to accommodate our players if we are about to have them change? But once again, this begins with them. I think if we give them the tools and the prompts, it's up to them. Okay. All right. And the hazardous practices. So it's a linear journey that is hidden from being linear. There are forced trials. How much we force trials is also a quick, and how do we force trials is also a trick. We must very deeply renegade the shame of failure. We should use alternative X signs and sensitivity tools that are immersed in the gaming environment, mentioned already before. There are unforeseen triggers. We must be prepared how to handle them, what kind of helpers there are to pull them out and into the game. We should never forego session -10, ritual contract and the debrief, definitely, it's a must. We shall not surmise that we have the same shared understanding of symbology, folklore, story workings, that we place this whole thing because these are their crutches. If they don't, we can educate them, give them some folktales to read upon, and they will gladly do that, actually. And they can use it. They will already feel like, holy shit, I just read that, damn, I'm clever. And it's great. And the great trio, they will often feel like this, but the gaming environment shall not prompt that feeling that there's no way out, there's no way back, there's no way around. There must be always a way out and always a way back and always a way around. Because this is what helps them gather their calmness and move on. And now we tie this all together. One question. I think we'll be probably a little bit late by finishing it, about 15 to 20 minutes. Is it all right? Thank God. Okay, you prepared for me. Thank you. 15 to 20 minutes.
Can it be 50?
Yes, okay. I will wrap this up. This is actually the final part of it, so... Okay, we're going to tie this all together now. Wait a sec. Yeah, so we got all these mishmash things we have mentioned. How do we put them into a structure? If you have ever done collaborative design, this is the part I call the inspiration part, inspirative parts, where everybody just throw into the hat, rainbow puking, a huge batch of great ideas, and they just don't mix well, but it doesn't matter. It's all right. First we puke, and then we clear the table. So we got lucidity, we got gaming, liminality, aesthetics that are needed, the ritual script, the theatrics that helps the props and the location. We must also talk about boundaries and players' agency, and of course, the whole social preset of it being community. I do believe they can be arranged in a workable model, as seen here. If we look at that, gaming is the center because this is the experience we want to create. This is, once again, the structure will be given. It's going to be probably a mythic structure. And first and foremost, we create an experience. We design an experience. So gaming will be central. And it will have 4 branches or 4 pillars, let's say. 4 pillars, yes. One is lucidity and ritual script. One is liminality and community, because they are very closely tied together both in theme and in effect. One is the visuals, theatric and aesthetics, and one, the safety tools and the player safety, boundaries and agency. So in a much more easier setup, we can formulate it as like this: setting, environment, props, and safety. I do believe that if we design around these 4 pillars, understanding what elements, what formal elements we should strive forward, this actually greatly simplifies the very arduous process I just put you through. I do believe this is going to help. However, this is still from a bird's eye view perspective, because this is from an outsider's point of view. You will be organizers, you will be writers, you need an insider's view. And as we understand it, the things we write as a drafts are not for the players, they are for us. So I went a little bit through, wait a sec. Yes, and added this. There's a little certain level of production and gaming. They are all interlinked. The production is for the LARPing crew, actually. But it all relates, all blends together. We should, as a LARPing crew, once we have this whole thing down, the setting, the environment design, the props design, the safety tools, and of course the gamifying elements and gamified mechanics. As designers, as a collaborative creative crew, as organizers of LARPs, then we must understand how in hell do we make this whole stuff happen. We know what needs to be done, but we don't know the how. And this, I swear to God, I'm going to write a book about this day. The basic of all design thinking, I believe, is differentiating between the what and the how. This is the what, and this is the how. It always comes second, but it's just as important. So as LARP organizers, I believe you should think about how to make these meanings you want to portray transferable and understandable. If you have a template to work with, how can it be reused for new and new and new Lucid or ritual gaming scenarios? So you gotta come up with a template you can reuse. Once again. Who loves Rick and Morty? Yeah, okay. The guy who wrote it is called Dan Harmon. Have you realized that Rick and Morty has a very clear story structure to them? It's very well hidden, but there is. He uses a variant of the plot embryo, and the plot embryo is an 8-stage process, a variation of the hero's journey. The emphasis is more on the fallout caused by the early acquirement of things they think they needed, but they actually just wanted, and the prices they pay, and the pain they cause and they suffer. Getting back to ground zero and to the stepping stone at the end of the episode is the outcome. They gotta go back to zero from minus, and this is a gift enough for most Rick and Morty episodes. It's only on the long run where they learn from these lessons. So this is why it's important to have a fixed template of both practices and story structures. Monitoring is very simple. Monitoring is if you create a template, once you're gonna monitor the satisfaction of players, as you have mentioned, but you will also have to monitor whom do you give this template to? Whom do you allow into this little circle? Who is allowed to use your template and your ideas? And how can you make sure that they follow the same value sets, same boundaries you have set up? It's very simple, because you can come up with a great structure, you can come up with a great team, but if you give it to the wrong hands, they will not give a shit about, for example, player safety, or they might try to push an agenda onto them, turning that into a serious game, literally. And of course, crew preparations, it's very simple. Who boils the coffee, who brings in the guys, who takes care of the cars. Simple, classical event organizing stuff. But now we're gonna sum this up, and this is the end of it. So I came up with these 4 questions, and I want us to answer it, and this is how we wrap this up. So after all this, after all these layered and tendy and revealing ideas I've shared with you, I want you to try and formulate your own opinions about what do you think Lucid Gaming is? And then we're going to go over to the questions. So what do you think after all this Lucid Gaming is? How could you sum this up, what this whole stuff is about? Quickly, easily, don't sweat it. Any ideas? Is it too big or is it too confusing? Be honest. Any ideas?
Well, for me, I believe it's a bit confusing as I don't see any difference for regular gaming and
Yes.
gaming. It's the same thing. You're using a lot of metaphors throughout
Mm-hmm.
the presentation.
Yes.
So just gaming.
I do believe so. No. I was actually prepared that I will gonna get these criticisms. I think it's very similar to any kind of LARP or TTRPG scenario. What is different is that it emphasizes and prompts personal and internal changes most, and it uses mythic structures most. For me, these are the most important challenges, and because these are geared towards different things, there are things that are more important, like overcoming the challenges, and things are less important, like the player characters' identities. So this is why I call it, this is not groundbreaking, this is just a variation of something known that has a different emphasis. It has emphasis based on myth and based on personal contributions and tribulations.
So could you say that it's like regular?
Yes.
From the creator's part, it's more deliberate and more willful attempt
Yes.
at tapping into the mythological hero's journey.
Yes, and
Bringing it into the forefront.
yes, definitely, and by prompting even somewhat psychological transformative experience. Yes, I mean, that's the gist of it. This is why it's called lucid gaming. The lucid part, however, only surfaces in a manner that to further alleviate the playing grounds, we're going to use some ethereal theatrics and some magical more props. That's it. I mean, I never promised I'm going to be shitting Spanish wax, but I wanted you to understand, and I wanted to see it through myself, how a remix of priorities can very vastly lead to an absolutely different game than what you have experienced. Similar, but not the same. Any ideas?
I have too many, so just...
Great. No, one. I want to hear just one.
Okay.
Yes?
Can you both the hero's journey
Yes.
and our, as far as for many examples I've encountered, and the usual notions of dreaming,
Mm-hmm.
which is historically not absolute, but let's consider that,
Mhm.
are singular.
Yes, very similar.
But LARP is by definition social.
Mhm.
How you do this? How you do like multiply hero's journey in the same way?
Excellent question. I really dig that you asked it, because once again, a hero's journey seems only social because we follow the hero's point of view and he's the star of it. Everyone else is just practically a contributor to his journey. I think, and this might be just an idea, we can do this in small groups where everyone, let's say everyone, there's a wizard, there's a warrior, there's a trickster. It doesn't matter. It's not about the classes, it's about the roles they play. And in certain trials, one comes to surface and the others support. In others, the other comes to surface and the other support. So it's always someone else at the front and the others can help them both think and solve the problem. So I think the solution to this would be stated as small group play. I think this would benefit to it.
Sounds more fitted to tabletop.
Sorry?
Sounds much more fitted to tabletop gaming. LARP from what I can imagine.
It's understandable. However, on tabletop games, I absolutely don't think that the kind of transformative effect could be.
But maybe like tabletop with like lots of effects.
Yes.
Finishes, when there is some guide,
Mhm.
visual guide, play as
Mhm.
game master, that is leading people in it, but it's still most of the description, most of the things would be fitted as tabletop
Mhm.
playing. Of course, dice and cards,
Mhm.
everything like resolution.
Yes.
The mechanics would be also more fetishized, more
Mhm, mhm.
sacralized.
Yes, this is not a LARP game design method. This is a game design method. I absolutely think that it can be used to design computer games, tabletop games, card games, freaking dice poker even. I think it's applicable to other areas, but I understand where you're coming from. However, I emphasize LARP not just because this is a LARP convention, but I emphasize that where this can truly shine is about actually helping each other overcome the kind of hurdles we choose as players. And that kind of interactivity, that kind of support can only be truly given to each other in a live acting environment. Yes?
So my thought,
Yes.
it's not answering your question.
It's okay.
Thought I have, is that in today's very materialistic, functionalist worldview that is like the dominant worldview, in order for such games to achieve mainstream appeal, it is important for whatever element of sacredness are embedded within it to function within the current materialistic, let's say, worldview, and thus be dissociated from the mystical, magical as much as possible. Like, for example, I have seen such processes be undergone by, let's say, core or initial, let's say, community, which was the debate community, the debate community, in which you can find almost all of these elements, not designed with intent, but having the community as
present.
Them. Yeah. But there is very mainstream. There are very non-gamers or mainstreamers within the community, and they buy into it because basically they
We're human.
Yes, they don't seem mystical at all.
Yes. Yes, it's very tricky. It's very funny because I actually have a role-playing game in mind that has the basic mechanics based on these kind of mythic tropes, but it's very important that the games you play with it don't have to be fantastic at all. But the tropes work still. I mean, you could play Star Wars as an Idaho farmer boy actually getting into biker culture. And the freaking drug dealer or the drug lord could be Palpatine, and the Empire would be either the police or the rival biker gang. So you could just change the roles, but not the tropes behind them, not the archetypes. I think coming up with this kind of appeal, this kind of very strong but very adaptable skeleton is the key to a mainstream success. However, I don't think about that much. But that, I mean, of course, who wouldn't love some money? Who would love to share this kind of experience with others? But first and foremost, the truly transformative part is, once again, gonna refer back to good old Turner here. Once again, is about the actual experience you undergo as an actor. That's the psychological transformative element. This is the most metamorphic element. This is where you can turn your transient knowledge into robust knowledge. And I do believe this is quite fitting, and it can be truly life-changing only through LARP. Not just because of interactivity, but because interactivity reacting with personal studies and mythic structures. Does this give you a proper answer? Okay, thank you very much for your insight. If you wish to debate this further, we can get there, especially towards the end of the evening. Thank you very much for the extra time. There are some great references. I strongly recommend you to check them out. These are used Metamorphosis from Naso, Campbell, Victor Turner, this transient knowledge stuff, Zimbardo. There's a great little page called dramadice.com. It's a collection of safety tools for any kind of RPGs, very strongly recommended. There's Die RPG by Kieron Gillen, and it's a fantastic, fantastic comic book too. Very meta, but very, very heart-wrenching. It's beautiful. It's a 20-sided and 20-issue stuff. And The Anthropology of Magic is a great book I think we all should get into. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for your input. It was very educational for me. Hope it was for you too. Thank you.
All right, folks. So here